My duty at this time is to make a kind of welcome, which I'm doing right now, and then to present some ideas about to just frame the 2 days. So I'll be using some slides as I come about that. I'm speaking briefly to us, briefly, hopefully. Right, I'm speaking on power, alternative power for power alternatives. Alternative power for power alternatives. And let me just say, first of all, that we're having similar conversations by Oil Watch members in Latin America and Oil Watch members and partners in Southeast Asia. So this is more or less, although this is hosted from Nigeria, this is the African consultation. I will be having the privilege of hearing from our partners from Southeast Asia and Latin America. Again, I'm going to have this conversation on alternative power for power alternatives. And the first thing I want us to look at is that power we have to understand the meaning of power. And power is one word that has meanings in different fields. In area of politics, you have political power, you have military power, you have religious power, you have electrical power, sports power in sports, and power of attorney in law, and even some number raised to power, something, or one thing or the other in mathematics. In physics, energy power means energy produced by means such as electrical or mechanical ones in order to operate a device or a machine. And so, but when you come to electrical power, it can come from many sources. It can be solar power, fossil fuels power, nuclear power, steam engine power, thermal power, wave power, hydropower, a number of varieties of ways. But one critical area that we need to also look at is the meaning of power in socio-political perspective. In social science and politics, power means the capacity to influence the actions, beliefs, or conduct of other people, of others. It could be a group of people, it could be individuals. The capacity to influence the actions, beliefs, or conduct of others. And we want to, in this conversation, bridge this social science, this political science kind of power definition with the power definition that we talk about when we're talking about energy. We'll come back to that. But first of all, let's just go ahead and look at some power issues in Africa. There's a lot of, one of the major area of issues with power in Africa is about hydropower. Now, we all agree that small-scale hydropower is okay. There's no argument about that. It can be run very cheaply. It doesn't disrupt rivers. If it fails, it doesn't cause flooding of communities. It doesn't kill people. But big dams are a big problem. And there are many big dams proposed in Africa. The map on the screen shows 32 locations for major or large African reservoirs. And there are new ones coming up. There's one that is creating political tension between Ethiopia, Sudan, and Egypt, and that is Ethiopia's Renaissance Dam, which is causing a lot of, there's been a lot of discussions, and recently talks were held between Ethiopia, Sudan, and Egypt about that dam. And the concerns for Sudan believes it can benefit, of course, from cheaper energy if the dam is built, but then they also have the fear that if the dam fails, there will be catastrophic flooding that would lead to a loss of life and territory in Sudan. But for Egypt, Egypt is afraid of that dam because it will reduce their share of the Blue Nile. This dam is built on the River Nile. It will affect the flow of water to Egypt, and especially if the dam fills up very quickly, the amount of water going downstream will be reduced. So Egypt is very worried about that. But for Ethiopia, they want to just have power, and then they want to be a net exporter of electricity power. Another dam that is causing concern in Africa is the Inga 3 dam in DRC. Now, Inga 1 and Inga 2 were built in 1972 and 1982 under the Mobutu regime. And those two dams combined produce just about 2,132 megawatts of electricity. And up to date, they've never performed beyond 40% of their capacity, of installed capacity. That's almost like the power situation in Nigeria, where you have so much installed, but very little produced and even less shared. So that's a big problem. The dam, the Inga Dam, right now, there's a third Inga Dam being proposed that will ramp up the power here from just a few megawatts to 10 gigawatts to about, I think, 40 gigawatts of electricity if it's fully built. And this dam is being built on the Congo River. There are a lot of concerns about the dam. First of all, the dam would not supply much electricity to Congo itself, but maybe supply a bulk of their power to South Africa, to feed industries in South Africa, to feed industries in Congo, the mining powers in Congo, and maybe possibly export some of the power to Nigeria. But 90% of Congolese don't have access to electricity. Now that is really, really horrible. And to think that even this dam being proposed with all the ecological challenges it may create is not really being aimed at providing power to the people of Congo. That's a big problem. Now, the other issue that we consider when we talk about energy or power alternatives in Africa is the fact that our countries, crude oil is being found almost everywhere on the continent. And our politicians are totally hooked on the fact that they believe that is a kind of bonanza given to them by nature, so they have to dig the oil and to burn the oil. They just want to get it. So we're having a lot of projects coming up. Even with the pandemic lowering oil prices, there are many unbelievably big projects being pursued on the continent, and all across the continent. One of the things that has come out from this is that we see the oil industry position when it comes to finance. They don't necessarily make a lot of money by digging up oil, coal, or gas to sell, but their power depends on the amount of reserve they have. So the more reserve they can show they have, the more confidence their shareholders have, so the more investment they make in those oil companies. But we've seen a situation in Mozambique where liquefied natural gas project operated by Total is being capitalized by the monetization of the reserves that they have in deep water area one of that country. So just because of the amount of gas reserve, people are ready to put in money for the project, and that makes it makes it a win-win for the fossil fuel industry and locks in the concept, the idea that Africa can keep on burning fossil fuels. We have also quite a number of fossil fuel projects on the continent, including the 11 billion Dangote refinery that's been planned for, that's been built in the Lekki Free Trade Zone in Lagos. Now, when you hear free trade zone, it means that even though this power plant, this refinery is being built on your territory, it doesn't really belong to your territory. It's going to be run by laws that are not governed by are not really governed by the country, but to be run as though it's in a foreign territory. And so they may not really pay all the tax Nigeria would expect. And we may be importing the resources from that refinery. We have that kind of arrangement across the continent. And now that for many of our countries to balance their budget would depend a lot on the cost of crude oil, including Nigeria, of course. For the countries to balance their budget from oil revenue, oil prices must be very high, must remain very high. For example, for Nigeria to balance its budget from oil and not really have to worry about anything, oil should be costing about $144 per barrel. This is an IMF data. Nigeria should be having oil at sold at $109 per barrel. Libya should be $100 per barrel. Angola is a bit lower at $55 per barrel. But we do know that the price of oil right now is hovering around $40 per barrel. So all these countries dependent on fossil fuel are in deep trouble. They are drowning in crude. Even though they have the crude, it's not bringing much help. This is a big challenge, especially when we see that many more countries like Uganda, Kenya, and even Senegal, that are thinking more about opening up oil wells, investing in the business when the world is moving rapidly away from fossil fuel, dependence on fossil fuel as an energy source. So what are we thinking? What are we thinking? We're not even thinking about the impact, the implication of burning fossil fuels and climate change in Africa. If only the known reserves are utilized right now, the developed reserves are all dug up and sold and burnt right now, Nigeria's contribution Africa's contribution would exceed the 2 degrees target set by the Paris Agreement. And if both the current developed fields and the newly found fields are developed, excavated, and burnt, then of course we totally, you can see the graph will be going off the sheet, and that will be a big problem for the continent. Now, of course, we do know that I mentioned earlier that Africa has a lot of shortage in terms of access to electricity. Only 40% of Africans have electricity, and Nigeria has very low supply. And from beginning of July, that's next month, is a plan to hike electricity tariffs, which doesn't just make sense, because right now people are paying for no power, that we're paying estimated bills, and there's a lot of discontent across the land for this kind of uncalled for hike in the tariff. Well, so that the question that people ask these days is, can Africa afford not to invest in, not to dig up all the coal that we have, all the oil that we have, and all the gas that we have, if that's the way we're going to develop, and if that we're going to make progress? And the issue of progress is something, this issue of development and progress is something that we really need to look at and to ask ourselves, what is the meaning of progress? What's the meaning of development? What is the meaning of power? What's the meaning of energy? Is there a target that we are trying to? Is there somebody who wants to catch up? Can we catch up with them? Is the objective condition that help them to exploit, enslave, and just grab resources, can it be replicated today? If it cannot be replicated today, does it make sense for us to think that this is the only way to go? Recently, I was on a webinar talk about this issue when somebody asked me the question, say, is it fair not to allow countries in the global south to adopt the destructive pattern that builds the global north? Now, that is a loaded question. Is it fair to ask Africans, for example, not to follow the pattern of Europe or North America? This is a question that I was being asked. And this is a question we should ask ourselves. Many people are saying that, look, we should get power and go forward by any means necessary. But you know, when Frantz Fanon coined this text, that phrase, power by any means necessary, he wasn't thinking about something that you do that will harm yourself. When Malcolm X popularized this phrase, power by all means, by any means necessary, it wasn't saying you're going to pick up something and damage yourself so that you can have power. Of course, if you are not alive, you cannot have power. What power do you have in death? Except you're the sacrificial lamb. Now, the issue is, what we're driving is that in this meeting today and tomorrow, we have to critically look at alternative power and power alternatives. What are the alternatives? How do we get there? Are we forced to? Are we stuck where we are? Is it only one kind of thinking that we have? Can we think differently? But Einstein said to think the same way all the time and expect to have a different solution, to have a different outcome is a form of madness. I don't think we're mad in Africa. We have a capacity to look at what is looming. In terms of global warming, the global warming impacts on Africa are enormous. Most parts of Africa, the temperature in Africa in some parts is rising at a level much higher than the global average. So if we keep saying that nothing is going wrong, then we're going to have Africa roasted or burnt or cooked, as the case may be. We remember at the beginning of last year, we had terrific cyclones, Cyclone Ida and Cyclone Kenneth, that hit the eastern coast of Southern Africa, had a lot of catastrophic impact on Mozambique, on Zimbabwe, and around Malawi, around that axis. And we're told that it was because the Indian Ocean was getting warmer than normal. Now, global temperature increase will bring more cyclones in Africa. We're going to have more flooding. A small flood in Nigeria becomes a big problem. People are losing their life, properties destroyed. We're going to have more droughts across the continent. Desertification is a big problem across the Sahel of Africa, and temperature increase, as I mentioned. Now, when we look at those impacts, and we know that burning fossil fuels and depending on fossil fuels compound this problem, should we say we don't really mind as far as we can have that can burn today or get extracted and get some money today and forget about tomorrow? That, I think, in one sense, I don't want to think for anybody, is we're free to think, we're going to think about this together. I believe that thinking that way actually is intergenerational blindness. We're not looking at the future. We don't care about those coming after us. We're not talking about those who are growing up under our guidance, our children, our grandchildren. So we really need to pause to think. And then again, the solution being proposed for global warming is imposing carbon colonialism and carbon slavery on Africa and countries in the global south. We talk about carbon sinks and carbon offsets, and even the net zero narrative. The net zero narrative means that you can keep polluting, but find a way of offsetting your pollution so that when the equation is balanced, you come to net zero. In other words, your pollution and your storing of the pollutant somewhere shows that there is really no pollution in the atmosphere. But this is mathematics. Nature does not work by mathematics. Nature is nature. Nature is an intricate system. Mother Earth is an intricate system that operates in a way that is best understood by her. We can just try to understand ecosystem relationships, but the best we can do is not the totality of knowledge about how nature works. And thinking that you can pollute while you capture all the carbon in trees, while you colonize people to watch over trees so that you can keep pumping greenhouse to the atmosphere is just a colonial ideas. We have example of real carbon slavery that's been enacted in a place in Mozambique where families were paid to less than $100 to watch over trees for 99 years. And the agreement said if those watch over the trees die, the children have a duty to keep watching and ensuring that the trees keep alive. And so all the default solutions are linked to land grabs, sea grabs, and we're going to have a webinar in the next coming weeks or about sea grabbing under the guise of the blue economy. And we talk about sky grabbing through geoengineering and other fake or other false solutions. And of course, today we're going to hear more about nuclear power. So drawing to a conclusion about this conversation, we have to look at alternative power for the attainment of power alternatives. For us to understand this, we must understand the logic of power, the power equation. And the basis of this presentation is that if people are the ones deciding what kind of power they want, what kind of policies they want, what kind of energy source they want, whether they want renewable energy, solar power, or they want fossil fuel-driven power. If people are the ones deciding, they would decide devoid of without being teleguided by fossil fuel industries who are heavily influencing climate discussions, and they will be able to also not have the baggage that politicians who depend on fossil fuel industries have. You know, the unholy wedlock between politicians and fossil fuel companies that does not allow them to think clearly. Now, that is what will happen. We will not be trapped in that way of thinking if people actually have the power. So people power is what we're talking about, not neo-colonial power, not power that allow ecocide, not power that does not demand that climate debt should be recognized and paid, not powers that go to conferences with project proposals looking for so-called green finance, whereas they can just demand payment for the damage done to the global south by the destructive powers, destructive exploitation of rich countries who are reaped inordinate profit from the continent. We can see signals in Europe and in the United States of America where statues set up to celebrate slave traders are being pulled down. We have to pull down these statues also in our minds. We have to liberate ourselves from this colonial mentality, from the slave mentality, that those who are enslaving us have our best interest. It never happens. They don't have your best interest. And this is why we're saying that we must devise means of alternative power, radical socio-economic transformation, people's assemblies and people's dialogue. We're having a people's dialogue right now. And we'll still have it tomorrow, continue tomorrow. And even when the webinar is over, that dialogue must continue in our villages, in our states, in wherever we have the place. And the whole aim is that we must reclaim power and be the one to drive the direction of what we call progress, what is actually well-meaning, well-living for us, and what is the future that we want. We have to draw up our own narrative, own this story, envision a future that we want. Then together we join our hands and this is how to get there. We may have different pathways, but the picture must be the same at the end of the tunnel. We want to get there, and we find how to get there. And we must be active in politics, and we must strengthen solidarity. This is why we're having this meeting with our partners from Southeast Asia participating, bringing some ideas about how they're doing it over there. Our partners from Latin America being a part of this meeting and telling us how, sharing ideas about how they're doing there over there, so that we can all come together to build the future that we want and the energy source and the energy type that we want. So, brothers and sisters, this is my welcome presentation. It's not a welcome address, and I just thought I should share these ideas, so that as we go through this meeting today and tomorrow, we can keep thinking about this.